Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today, I will give a summary about my PhD work here at CIC, and we will talk about engaging the stakeholders in the learning analytics design process. After many years working as a US user experience practitioner in academia, I realized that most of my design meetings are missing one key stakeholders. Most of the time, we invite teachers, and most importantly, learners. And this is only a task that designers and researchers and other academic administrators are actually doing. For me, this is very important to actually figure it out, and this became the inspiration for my PhD work. Usually learning analytics design products are commonly delivered through applications and dashboards and many other learning analytics products. But most of the time, this has been done by the researcher. The researcher is in charge of doing the research task, the designing, and actually implementing what a learning analytics product looks like. By now, inviting stakeholders to the design process already started to come up with problems. We are neglecting the student involvement in the design process. We are making assumptions of what it is the best for them, and we are misrepresenting their learning interest. In case of teachers, when we are not inviting teachers to the design process, this leads to have an impact on how they adopt the tools. We are just telling them, here, have a learning analytics tool and you have to use it. This leads to actually alienation from the learning process. There's a feel of not having a voice on what is being done with my data. They feel concerned about what is the best thing to do and how people are making decisions in their behalf. And there's a feel of disengagement with the learning environment. To find an answer to how stakeholders collaborate and how it can be done in learning analytics, we took concepts from the co-design field. The co-design is a field that invites stakeholders to actually participate and become partners in the design process. This means that learners are not only consulted on what it is the best the tool actually looks like or how effective the tool is. It is actually to sit with them and come step by step. This while the researcher or the expert is actually guiding the process. This is actually being implemented in other fields, but learning analytics can benefit from thinking about co-design. When it comes to learning analytics, data and education are two concepts that are actually very well merged. We have mining techniques, analytics method, analytics design, with very complex concepts like epistemic theory, the learning design, and the learning experience, two fields that actually merge and requires a lot of expertise. If we want to add stakeholders in collaboration, we are bringing a lot of methods, techniques, and a collaborative process that may not be understandable for everyone. For this, we identify that to bring stakeholders into learning analytics design, there's still a gap about active stakeholders collaboration in the design process. In summary of this gap, it is easy to understand that when we mean about stakeholders collaboration, we want to see that there is a lack of understanding of how to support designers and researchers. What kind of tools they can use to actually invite people to collaborate. There is no clear role of the co-design practitioner, who will take the lead or who will guide people through the co-design process. And there's an unclear definition of what could actually go wrong when you invite people. Like in other fields, collaborating with people is really hard, and it may be harder for learning analytics being that specific. For my research work, I identified three main research questions that are actually tied to this gap that we identified. First, how co-design techniques can actually support the learning analytics practitioner? Second, what is the role of the co-design practitioner? What do you have to do if you want to implement co-design? And what are your responsibilities? And three, what are the obstacles and challenges that you can find when you want to bring people in collaboration? To find an answer to these three research questions, we have to be very specific about the methodology, since this is a design thesis merged with a research-specific thesis. For this, I use a design-based research approach. This means that we run multiple iterations along the 3 years till we find out an answer to our research questions. This is constant work and actually leads us to a main contribution, and actually collaborating with other people actually helps us to develop better co-design theory. In terms of design, when we talk about iterations, we want to be very specific how actually collaboration happens in face-to-face sessions. For this, we complemented the design-based research approach with design thinking to separate our iterations into 5 main stages. empathy, definition, ideation, prototyping, and testing. We did this in different multiple steps to actually find an answer. We didn't finish one iteration in the same way, since the context in learning analytics design matters, and people are coming in and out the sessions. This is why we needed to complement design-based research, since everything in the design process can be very flexible, and we never know what will happen. For this, we use a qualitative approach to analysis methods, and we wanted to adopt established analytics method using transcript analysis and thematic analysis. The first one is that we take conversations that happen between people collaborating, and we started to code based on our research questions. More details, this looks like we identify keywords and phrases that may look in context about one specific challenge. Our thematic analysis starts by looking how effective is the tool that they are being using, how the stakeholders interact with the tool, and how we can adapt or adopt the co-design tools for them to work. Then we were looking at what you're doing. Are you acting as a researcher or as a facilitator? What is the context of the action that you are doing when you are a facilitator? Are you trying to improvise with people? Are you actually to make sense of what they are doing? Are you helping them to negotiate? And finally, we're looking at what kind of challenge can emerge. We always have a kind of an idea when people collaborate. We will go further into the challenges in our contribution. But this became part of our present teams to code that information. To actually measure collaboration, we have to look into how we can actually see collaboration when it is really hard to see what it is the task. For this, we adapted critical incidents and design vignettes to illustrate how people collaborate. In this example, we take a look at how is the conversation going. What is the participant doing? What is the facilitator actually doing? And what is happening in the table with the tool? We wanted to illustrate this, which is really hard, not doing this by video. And we implemented what we call the design vignettes. This is a combination between what is the facilitator, what they are actually saying, and what is the role of the tool. Some actions are actually triggered by the tool, but some actions are actually triggered by what the facilitator asked them to do. So this is a way to illustrate how people collaborate. For our final questions about the role of the co-design practitioner, it was actually really hard to start from zero, so we used the knowledge chart framework. This is a framework that actually gives you context of why you are doing things. The facilitator can do many things during the session, but most of them respond to what is actually the intention when working with participants. Are we building the aesthetics of the product? Is this about making sense of your idea? Or do I have to improvise to keep the conversation going? We don't have to start from zero, but we wanted to complement this, which is part of our contribution. We run multiple iterations along 3 different case studies. We wanted the case studies to be so diverse and from different faculties, so we have different feeling of how stakeholders can actually collaborate. The first one is a work we do with the nursing students, part of the health faculty. Here, we wanted to help students to get better feedback when they do simulations. In simulation practice, they have to enact some things with mannequins. And we realized that they don't have proper feedback at the end because there are so many students and the teacher can spend a lot of time with them. So we wanted to help them by delivering a learning analytics tool through a dashboard or a timeline to tell them where they made a mistake or what is actually happening. We wanted to invite learners as the main stakeholders. We invited teachers, learning designers, the course director, and us participating as researcher and co-design practitioners. In the end, the research team delivered a timeline to receive feedback. This actually to point where they made an actual mistake, what is has to be done, what is the interaction with the mannequin, and what is actually happening. This is how the learning analytics tool looked like in the end. For case study 2, we wanted to help students from the Masters in Data Science and Innovation. In this case, students wanted to get help on tracking the grad attributes development. They wanted to see how well they develop creative thinking, problem-solving skills, which led to maybe we need a learning analytics tool. And if we need a learning analytics tool, how it should look like. We wanted to do this in collaboration, and that leads to our second case study, using a current platform in Master in Data Science, which is CICAround. CICAround is a blogging platform that they use to actually write pieces that helps them to create better writing skills, their creative thinking, and problem solving. We invited learners, teachers, learning designers, data scientists, the course director, and other researchers to actually help us with the case study. In the end, we used the current CICAround platform and actually implemented some analytics component that actually helped them to take a better look at how they're using the platform and have better insights using the analytics component. For our TIRS case study, we use a current platform that is being used in universities called OnTask. OnTask is a learning analytics tool that helps to deliver personalized feedback to thousands of students. And it's a learning analytics tool that actually requires a little bit of setting up for teachers. For teachers, they have to set what are the rules for the different emails to be delivered. They have to interact with the panel, and they have to understand that the rules actually have an impact on how the message is being delivered. We wanted to do this in collaboration and became our case study 3. For this, we didn't invite learners, but we started with teachers, learning designers, faculty administrations, and academic administrators that were interested in implementing OnTask in their faculty. In the end, this is how OnTask actually looks like. It requires for people to actually set the filters, what kind of data will trigger the comment, and how the message have to be sent. This is supposed to be used by teachers, and we wanted to make it really easy for them to interact with the tool without actually using the interface. That's how we implemented co-design techniques. Now, my contributions. To actually solve all these problems and interact with the case studies, first, we deliver a toolkit for practitioners to adopt and adapt these things. People can just download a toolkit and start doing collaboration with people. We deliver an analysis of what you have to do, what is the role of the co-design practitioner. And we provide an analysis of what kind of challenges and obstacles you can find if you want to start doing co-design in learning analytics. So my first contribution, what did I do to actually deliver the toolkit and how we adopt and adapt techniques to implement co-design? First, we wanted to start what kind of tools are out there and how can we merge this into learning analytics? So we adopted a lot of co-design techniques, mostly 4 main techniques to do this. We started with traditional focus group. We helped to introduce people into the project. Let's start face-to-face conversations and talk about learning analytics, which proved to be useful since learners never hear about learning analytics, and in some cases never hear about data collection. Collaborative sketching actually helped people to actually illustrate the user interface, how you visualize the application, how it looks like, without having to code, without having to actually sketch. You have to use predefined objects, and we deliver an actually prototype in just 1 session, which proved to be useful. No more needed to further sessions or invite the designers to do the work. It's people doing exactly the work for everyone. Fabulation helped to put the problem into perspectives and all the components that actually became design features. You have to be using paper-based, they can use Post-its, and this helped them to measure how the activity they were doing, what is the problem while doing this, and in this case, superpowers means that you have all the resources available, how would you solve this problem? And this means that how a learning analytics tool can be seen as maybe a superpower. The collaborative persona helped to actually model how our learners look like. We understand that learners are so diverse and they have so different qualities that we can still find some of those similarities. So people have the opportunity to model themselves and say, this is who I am. This is as a nurse student, what kind of tools I use and what are my goals. And help the designer to understand who is the main user. The most important thing is that we needed new tools. And we didn't let the design team and me as a co-design practitioner to adapt new tools. The first one, the learner data journeys. This is a new tool that we propose to deliver feedback on where is the problem, where are the pain points, and where is the best opportunity to deliver a learning analytics tool. For this, we got inspiration from a current journey mapping. What is a journey mapping? A designer uses a journey mapping to illustrate what is happening the moment people interact with a service and move on through when they get what they want. And this allowed people to understand where is the pain point, where is happening the problem, how different customers actually use the same product, and how we can visualize this. Usually this thing is being used by designers and not being done in collaboration. We wanted to do this in collaboration for learning analytics, and we came up with a map. The learner data journey, as being published in the Australian Conference in Human-Computer Interaction, is a process that allows people to produce paper-based journeys. People illustrate how they do their things, allows the researcher to use all this information, analyze it, and deliver this information back to stakeholders. We gather information about what is the problem, analyze it, and tell you what it is wrong. How it looks like? Well, here's an example. In one of our collaborative sessions, we gave them a map of where the mannequins at the bedside distribution. So they started mapping, here's what I do the moment I get into the classroom, and they start mapping what is the problem. When they feel stress and they feel struggle, when they are doing fine, and when they come back to the tables, I want to discuss what is the feedback about. So we identified that the problem is not the whole simulation class. The problem is in the middle and in the end. These were not even possible without actually adapting a learner data journey. For the paper base, it's really easy to implement. You just have to get the map, get the markers, and you can do this in just one session. It is effective to give people the opportunity to have a voice. We realized that learners didn't have the opportunity before about talking about their problems. It was the first time for them to say, hey, maybe it's not about the learning analytics, but I don't feel comfortable not having any feedback. It helps to identify pain points. Where exactly is the problem in terms of position, time, and the context of the task. And it helps people to visualize opportunities to deliver a learning analytics tool. Maybe by this, we sometimes identify that there is no need maybe for a learning analytics tool. We need to change other things. But it was possible only after analyzing the learning data journey. We realized that we had so many data journeys in paper-based that were really hard to get to a conclusion. So we analyzed this data and produced a digital version that became a tool for people to navigate this information. Not everyone wants to read the whole 5 papers in there. And it's really hard for teachers to have the time to go through it. So this digital tool allowed teachers and learners to go through the information, click on the summary of what was happening, and see what people are saying about. Like, I'm struggling here because these are my comments. So teachers have the opportunity to see the summary. Another thing was the opportunity to deliver analytics back to them. Here we have the survey questionnaire and the results for them to see how they value information. The other thing is that they have the chance to see the whole transcript. We wanted to make sure that we don't lose any context of the quote. We realized that in collaboration, it's really common to take the quote without the context and make the best out of it and do your own version. We wanted for us to see if that's actually useful for them. The digital version of the journey actually processes a synthesis and cleans up the multiple collaboration steps. It prompts to instant reflection, allow people to reflect how good I'm doing as a teacher and what are the problems that students are actually reporting. It produced feedback useful for the co-design practitioner. For us as designers, it was useful to see that we need something at the end of the session. It can be something really big, it can be an application, and the space actually matters because we just can't deliver a really big dashboard in there in the middle of the room. And we wanted to see this in context of the problem. Another interesting thing is when we analyze how the clickstream goes, we create a heat map to see, so what teachers are looking at in this collaborative tool. We found out interesting that teachers only use the summarized part. They want to see just the summary, and this maybe is because they are really busy or something, but they want to see a summary of what did you found as a researcher and what are the insights for your design practice. For learners, it was interesting that they were looking for what their other partners say. According to them, is that they say that they don't feel alone, knowing that other people are struggling the same. They are not going through the same steps. So they have the opportunity to see that, look, another student is actually reporting the same. So this is something that we didn't expect it because we thought that learners, they were going for the easiest part. It was interesting that we opened this channel for them. The second adapted tool, new tool that we call is a card-based approach to bring playing activity to co-design activities. The card-based design games are used in other fields to actually break the design stages into usable cards and collaborate with other people that are not in the same department. You can have people that start different languages, but they can use the cards to collaborate in an effective way. We use this approach to create our own cards that we call the LA deck. The LA deck is a combination of cards that breaks the learning analytics design process. It allows people to talk about the learning objective, complex things like the data source and analytics method, talking about the privacy of the student's data, how the tool will look like, and what kind of developers tools we can use. We also gave the opportunity to create their own cards. We wanted to see if there's something missing to actually complete a learning analytics design project. We gave them the opportunity to assign resources, which is time and money. This is in the way that we wanted for them to answer. Where do you think we should spend our time? Delivering the tool, finding an analytics method, or we want a better learning designer? Because as in many other projects, time is very limited and money is way more limited than time. An example of how people actually use this, this is one session where 3 stakeholders actually wanted to produce one of the components for the CICAround blogging platform. They started setting out what is the learning objective, they're actually making how the visualization looks like. They decided that it has to be a dashboard of visualization data, a chart that actually helps them to see their progress, and they went through all the different categories to talk about all the aspects that we think is a learning analytics project. These results were published in the conference, will be published in the next conference in learning analytics. And after we go into a deeper analysis, which is this is a first thing that people in the collaborative field wanted to do, we see that there's a similarity in how they use the cards. Mostly that they spend a lot of time talking about how the tool looks like, which is very important for learners. What is the data source? Where are we getting this data? And what is the analytics method? The other components that we thought that they will never talk about, they at least have the chance to talk about it. We never talk about learners talking about analytics method, since they are not maybe experts in analytics method. But the cards were really helpful for them to be introduced of what kind of data can be used and what are we doing with data. It is very similar for all the groups, and we realized that there is some effectiveness of doing this card approach. The effectiveness of the card approach that we use is that it provides a common language for people. Not everyone uses the same concept in IT, and not everyone talks about learning. We realize that developers doesn't understand anything about learning design. And in the other way, learning designers really struggle with analytics methods. The deck proved to be really useful to give categories enough. We wanted to break the learning design process, and the 6 or 5 categories that we presented were good enough to talk about a first prototype. And it facilitated creative combinations of information and ideas. Some ideas were connected through different stakeholders. When you propose something, I propose a different card, and they connect all the learning analytics design process. This is a complete going from the learning design to actually delivering a prototype. We took the same concept of using cards to actually produce something and used us to produce the rules in the OnTask version. We found really good, useful insight here, but in the other way of what is the limits of how you can apply a card-based approach. Going back to this interface, we see that this looks like actual coding, which for teachers, we realize that they may be really hard to actually understand. We wanted to take the concept of how coding actually looks like and make it an example of visual programming, to break this into most useful components without using the language of what a condition looks like. So we produce different cards that actually use this visual programming approach to produce the rules without using the language of coding. But we realized that the language plays a very important role. How? This is one of the groups that it was the only one that could use the cards as expected. It produced different rules, and it used the cards to deliver a text email. The problem is that most of our groups didn't actually complete the task. They were stuck here and they didn't understand how to use the source cards, the values. What do you mean with attributes or tables? And they were not able to complete the task. Why participants failed to complete the task? We realized that the language plays an important role in co-design tools. You just can't use conditions, if, value, attributes with everyone. And the co-design practitioner must be aware of this. You have to create a language common for everyone. The technical language used in cards is mostly familiar for IT, not educators. And that leads to not completing the task. The cards is a good idea. The language used in the cards, it wasn't as useful as we thought. And people disagree and have different ideas, but they didn't use the cards to negotiate this. They preferred to have this conversation. So the cards became useless. The co-design approach is effective, but the tool was implemented, it was not as effective as we thought. In the end, we had to modify the cards to actually have a better version and make it useful back to stakeholders. In the end, the co-design toolkit, we realized that the adoption and adaptation of techniques and tools benefits from stakeholder diversity. The more tools you have, the more people with diverse backgrounds you can manage. You have to understand the limitations and the context of the purpose. If you don't have any co-design session with people, you won't have to implement a 60-minute long session. The tools and techniques can be used to teach participants how to become better co-design partners. When they interact with stakeholders, they realize how hard it is to collaborate and why they were invited in the beginning. It's a task that requires time, and the co-design practitioner must be aware of that. Provide diverse communication channels for participants to communicate. Not everyone is really comfortable talking face-to-face. Some of them are really extroverts and shy. The tools actually help them to express themselves as they feel. Some of them like writing. Some of them really like to talk. Some of them are really good at explaining stuff. You have to provide these channels, and the toolkit allows that. The co-design process is not only about software development. In learning analytics, the task is also about a learning opportunity for participants. When they're interacting with a tool like the cards, they were learning about what kind of methods that exist. Some of them, it was the first time about talking about privacy. And it's the first time they hear this concept, and they learn something in the session at the same time that they were developing the tool. The toolkit was available through our website, and now it's being downloaded by other teams, so we're expecting for them to report other things. For my second contribution, we realized that there are many challenges that we have to tackle while using the tools and techniques. We identified 5 main challenges that happen when you bring co-design into learning analytics. The first one, surveillance. We are using data and we are actually tracking students. That can be considered by people as surveillance. How much is acceptable for me to share with you? How much are you tracking without my consent? And how much it has an impact in the discussion? Power relationships. It happens in every field, and it happens in learning analytics. Here, the power that a teacher represents in front of a learner can have an influence in how they express. You don't want to confront the teacher, or maybe you want, but they may create a friction for the co-design process. The learning design. This is about learning analytics design process. But talking about learning design will happen, and we want that to happen. The thing is that we have to find a balance. The session can become about the curriculum, because we are here to talk about the learning analytics tool. So we have to find a balance when to discuss learning design and when to discuss the learning analytics tool. The teaching and learning experience. As clear as it is, we realize that learners are not experts in teaching. They are not the pedagogical experts, but that doesn't mean they don't have a say. They are the first one experiences the learning environment. So they have a lot of insights about if it is useful or not. The last one, data and algorithm literacy. When we talk about learning analytics, data is a main component, so people have to be able to discuss about it. So the more they are literate about data, the more we can have a discussion. This can have an impact on how much we can go deep into privacy and stuff, based on the stakeholders' data and algorithm literacy. How they look like in our case studies? Well, surveillance is that, how much I'm willing to share? What is the purpose of you using my data? I never realized that you were using my data. So in one of our examples here with nursing students, we realized that they are not actually afraid of us using their data, but they were afraid that we are using that data against them, that there are repercussions of being exposed, and we have to deal with that as a co-design practitioner. They realize that information should be shared. If information is retained, it's pointless. The moment we expose that this is the privacy settings that you have been used and UTS has been tracking this for you, they realize, yeah, they know more than I talk, but it's not that bad. In terms of learning design, there are moments where the activity became about the learning aspect. Here, in our case study, when trying to define what a writing looks like in terms of a learning analytics representation, the course director started to see that this is a whole new problem. You can even measure how you're going to judge good writing, how good writing actually looks like. How do you see if someone is better than the other? So the question was to how can we deliver an analytics tool? And the conversation started to be, what it is even writing? So we have to measure that into, let's agree with something and move on to the next step. With data and algorithm literacy, it actually had an impact in one of our activities. We wanted to discuss in detail, what do you think about tracking your information with nursing students? Understanding that nursing students are not very well versed in data and algorithm literacy. We find out that they don't even realize that they're collecting data. So the conversation has to go like more basic and then moving forward more complex things. We just can ask people, what do you think about data and analytics method, without actually knowing that they have never heard about this concept before. In terms of teaching and learning experience, we asked the students about in what case learners are suggesting something that is not feasible in terms of learning design. An example of this happened during the nursing case study. Here, students wanted to receive feedback on the bedside. The moment they made a mistake with the mannequin, the moment they get an instant message, you did something wrong. Later, the teacher analyzed what the students say and realized it's not useful to get the feedback on the bedside because it's too much information. You get distracted from the demonstration. You gotta get this feedback at the end. We realized that learners are not actually experts in feedback. So you have to listen to the people that is expert in feedback, which in this case is the teacher. So we went with what the teacher said and implemented the tool at the end of the session. Power relationship. We expected to have this challenge in a face-to-face confrontation, like literature used to say. But that didn't happen with us. Even sessions between teachers and learners were actually very civilized. There were no discussions about it. But it happens in a different way. It happens in a matter of influence. After talking with the researcher in the nursing case study, this was just a matter of influence. When asking the other faculty to get students to participate in the co-design session, it was implied that the other person has control over who is participating and how much you can help me. If you don't have the people with a position of power in the other faculty, your project won't actually run. People will ignore your message or will actually try to change your research questions to fit their interest. It's a matter of influence, and it may happen in many faculties since they have their own interests and they are using their time to help you. We also find that some of these challenges are actually connected. Low data literacy actually limits privacy negotiations. When people are not very well versed in what it is data and privacy and surveillance, they don't have a say to actually negotiate how this is going to be used. So we find out that it's a current practice, the opt-out option, that actually doesn't help people because you put this language about surveillance and tracking when people can actually understand. So you take advantage of them, and that happens a lot in other applications. The other one is that when learning in experience actually leads to feasible learning design requests, learners can suggest a lot of things, but it may come from a perspective of inexperience in the learning design. So they will try to change the learning design sometimes, but that doesn't mean that you have to implement everything they have to say. You have to be very careful since the expert here is mostly the teacher or the learning designer. Finally, we provide an analysis of, so what is the facilitator doing? The people responsible of tracking the challenges, the tools, who is gonna attend these meetings. We take the knowledge chart framework to understand the context of the action. We will have to complement this of exactly, what are you doing? What is the facilitator doing in front of people? We also identify that making decisions at the end of each iteration is very important for each co-design process. Without making a decision, the process doesn't go forward. You have to make a decision, but you have to respect everyone's interest. Sometimes you have to do as a consensus. Sometimes you have to take the lead. How do we do this and how this emerges in my case studies? I will present this. First, we provide a new glossary of actions to tell practitioners what do you have to do. You can act in 6 different ways during the co-design sessions. You have to guide participants through the actions. You have to adapt the tools to bring to that session. You have to intervene so the conversation does not derail into something else. You have to represent other people. One student does not represent all students, but the practitioner has to be aware who will represent who is the voice for all the other stakeholders. You have to exemplify. If the people find it too complex, provide examples. The practitioner has to be aware about many examples that it can use. It has to inquire people into what is wrong. What do you think this is a problem? Why do you think the learning analytics tool will solve this? And move the conversation by inquire people into my research interest. The co-design practitioner, as we defined, it started as an umbrella term of the responsible of planning, managing, and implementing the co-design process. It looks pretty general. So we identified that there are two different roles that you play as a co-design practitioner. The first one, you are a researcher. The co-design practitioner does actually act as a researcher. It contributes to the learning analytics and the co-design research. I'm informing the learning analytics team, and I'm informing my practice, which is what tools are we going to do next? How are we going to implement this prototype? You bring other researchers to assist your skill set. The researcher cannot do everything, even when people are pushing to do a one-man project. You just can't do everything. You have to be aware when to bring other researchers to assist you with a specific task. That means that you have to be aware about your limitations and the context of the problem. You have to document the co-design process. All steps that you have been doing has to be tracked as a practice. The other role is that you act as a facilitator. What happens when I'm in front of everyone? You have to inquire stakeholders into reflection, as the action said. You are trying to understand what is the problem. You have to maintain the participatory landscape clean. This means that people will draw, move things around. You have to be aware of what actually makes sense and clean everything after the sessions, so everyone can go back and read the message. You have to improvise about the anchoring effect. This means that people will come in with an agenda and may try to get the conversations into that. I'm here talking about privacy, and I want to spend 30 minutes about talking about privacy. The facilitator has to move the conversation into the other topics, understanding the context of the session. You have to balance your personal research interest with what the stakeholder actually needs. I wanted to test the learning analytics tools and the co-design tools, but the nurse student just wanted to receive analytics feedback. You have to convince them that this is good for them and present them with different activities so they get engaged with the process. You just don't have to mandate them to participate. When it's making decisions, we define a matrix using a current literature. We set this in the learning analytics co-design process. How does this look like with examples? Well, at what point we wanted to see what kind of feedback would you like to get? Do you want to get critical incidents, mistakes? How much stress are you getting? People were very experienced. They understood what is the feedback about. So they have experience in the field. And they agreed that we need feedback. So we have to vote which one is the best option. So we have to move to the next step. We have to consultate when people are not experienced in the field, that none of us, not me, not you, are experts in analytics method. But we agree that we need an analytics method. So we have to consultate a learning analytics expert. In this case, also applies when actually asking for stress levels. Students were not interested in getting stress levels actually tracked. I'm not an expert in stress levels, so I didn't have a say in that. But we agreed that it was not necessary. We want to consultate an expert in this. The practitioner-led is when no one agrees in something, and they're inexperienced. We don't know about these things, and we don't even agree about that. It's about the practitioner. The practitioner has to use information from outside, his rationale about understanding the problem, and make a decision. How much they can agree, we have to be aware that to make a decision in collaboration, how much time you have available, how many options are out there, how much we understand the needs of the problem, how complex it is to implement this option, how committed you are to actually bring this into practice, and how much value this information has. You always have the seeds of them in some degree when making decisions, but you have to be aware as a practitioner how much you want to listen to participants. Finally, how these contributions are relevant for the learning analytics field. The toolkit and recommendations allow designers to bring collaboration into their projects. They can download this and continue to implement co-design. The practitioner acts as a facilitator and can guide the co-design process. Sometimes you are a researcher, sometimes you are a facilitator, sometimes you are both. And new co-design practitioners now can be prepared and aware of the emerging challenge before going into the process. They can prepare with multiple tools, different plans, understanding that the challenge that we presented will be in their projects. So thank you so much for coming. And now I think we have some time for some questions and answers. Thank you.